Welcome back to the Four Gardens podcast. In this episode, we'll continue focusing on health, which is the first garden in the Four Gardens approach to self-cultivation. Today, I'm joined by Yonah Levy for a conversation about mental health and meditation. Yonah guides people back to peace and from there to thriving through counseling, coaching, business wellness consulting, and group leadership. Yonah has worked with thousands of clients from all walks of life, helping them move beyond inner blockages and optimize their lives. He has been practicing and teaching mindfulness and meditation for over 2 decades. In this conversation, I was grateful to learn more about Yonah and his background, as well as about mindfulness and counseling, because he's someone in the community I've admired for a while, his teachings, and I followed him. And I had no idea he had this troubled childhood where he was actually shot twice in 2 different incidents he describes and suffered really intense pain. So this is a little bit different to this episode. We go a little deeper into his backstory and what brought him into these practices. Ari, how did this conversation meet you?
This conversation was very impactful because it mirrored to me how important healing elements of the past is. And particularly with this one, it has to do with the teenage years, which I know I moved to Israel at 12 years old and I had troubles adapting to this new world I moved into. And there was an element of struggle and pain. So it reminded me of how important it is to go back, but not just to the child years, but when you're growing up and developing from 12 to 18. So there's a lot of gold and lessons that I wish I would have known then. And I think it'd be really helpful to share with the younger generation on the importance of meditation, mindfulness, and spirituality as well as a form of relieving the pain and stepping into healing and thriving.
I think it's very relatable. I certainly relate to the suffering during those early teenage years. I think it's very common to just feel things so intensely and be shaped by those experiences. And the intensity that Yonah had of being institutionalized for his mental health, for his behavior, then is something that I think really, and then where he took that, I think is really an inspiring story of going from that institutionalization to being really a healer himself and a leader in the community. It's a great example for season 2 of what health can look like in someone's story, what a life really lived, engaged with mental health can look like. So he's definitely, it's definitely an inspirational and instructive story for us. And I'm just excited for this episode. And before we jump in, I want to remind people to like and subscribe here, to let us know what you think about the episode. Give us a review wherever you're listening to this podcast. It really helps us grow this. Just always love your input and reactions. However you feel inspired to share that. Let's jump right in with Yonah. Yonah, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Really glad to be here.
I'd love to learn more about you and how you got started on your path with counseling and meditation. Just want to hear more about your journey, learn about you.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. Well, that happened closer to 30 years ago. I was a kid in a lot of trouble. Things got pretty tough pretty early on for me, but my parents split up when I was 12, and that was really challenging for me. But how I dealt with it was, one, I wasn't aware that it was really challenging me, but I was skipping school, I was getting into drugs, I was getting into fights, I was getting suspended, I was super self-destructive in many ways. And what resulted was, not long after that time, I spent a year away from my home in different facilities. The last of a handful of them in that year, I ended up meeting a therapist who I connected with, and not right away. I didn't like him at all at first. But what happened was I began to trust him. And in part, I was playing the game of, doing the things that you're supposed to do to look like you're willing and making progress so you can get out. But the side effect was I started to feel happier than I ever had felt before, I ever remembered feeling before. So this included things like family therapy as well as individual and group therapy.
Yonah,
Um,
what was happening
yeah,
inside you then when you were, you talk? It sounded really painful, the divorce
yeah,
and the behavior
yeah.
issues. Before you got to started to receive that healing, that happiness from him,
hmm
what was the pain, uh,
Yeah.
the quality of it?
Well, I was super angry. I was really angry. I didn't know as much. I wasn't as emotionally intelligent to know what was happening um, internally as much as I was just really, really defiant. I looked for opportunities to do everything that I wasn't supposed to do and to confront people and to verbally fight. I remember I was some of the ways I would act out was I would, write on the walls or in the books in class. Um, Another part of that whole story is I grew up on the edge of a good neighborhood in a not so good neighborhood. And I dealt with a lot of things that were really challenging, like bullying, like, I got robbed more times than I could count as a kid, including by gunpoint. Um, and that comes to a later part of my story. It created a lot of pain and a lot of anger in me, in addition to also this family stuff that was happening. Um, but the fast forward to I'm I'm now 14 years old and I'm in this program that I was telling you about. It's a residential program, working with this therapist, and things are getting better. I'm having conversations with my dad, with my stepdad, with people that I wasn't at peace with my stepmom even. Um, but not long after I left, I wanted to, just sort of reassimilate or just kind of have some sense of belonging. But the places that where I was living and going to school, the people that were around me were getting into a lot of trouble. And not long after going out, I was threatened, like physically threatened. Someone essentially said, in a car full of people, I shouldn't be in this neighborhood, which was another neighborhood worse than mine. And, threatened me saying, I was lucky that I got to keep my coat and it's the winter. And so I returned with a gun. And I don't know exactly what I was planning on doing with it, but I was impulsive and also just didn't want to be bullied anymore. Didn't want to be taken advantage of because I was talking about that history. Longer story short, I take that gun into the bathroom of a rec center and I try to take the bullet out of the chamber, which I do, but I do it hastily. And I pull the trigger and a bullet goes through my palm, ricocheting off the other bullet I've taken out, and that goes right through my jacket, and blood squirting all over the place. I've never been shot before. I'm more than concerned, but I also had the wherewithal to go to the first person I could see that worked there and say, call an ambulance. I just been shot. I just shot myself. So that was an interesting time. That's how I originally got on probation as a kid. And I didn't quite get the lesson. So a little bit deeper into this story. Basically, the bullet travels in such a way that it's purely a flesh wound, no lasting damage whatsoever, no infection, nothing. It heals up really well in like a week or two. And somewhere a little bit before this, I had met essentially it was a family of people. No, it wasn't like, it was actually a family. And it was in this tougher neighborhood that I was just wanting to fit in with, just wanting to find a friends group, find a place. And I'm 14 and impressionable, and also not knowing really who I am as well. And I had this dirt bike from my bar mitzvah money, this electric dirt bike, and I'm letting people ride it around. I rode it over there, and I'm letting people that I don't know try it. One person takes it and never comes back, and later comes back and says he was robbed, and that wasn't the case. I spent the night at this family's house, and the next day or two, they call me and they say, "We got your bike back, and we made this guy's face look like a basketball." And I'd never had anyone really have my back like that. And so immediately I thought, these are people that I want in my life. What I also would learn is these people were, they had big hearts, but they also had a long history of abuse. And some of them had, a history of other things that maybe I don't want to, talk about here. But they had gone through some pretty tough stuff. And also done some pretty crazy things to other people. And fast forwarding a little bit after this flesh wound to my hand, and the lesson that I thought I learned was, don't play with a loaded gun, or don't point it where you don't want to shoot. I learned later that the lesson more was, this is not at all where I want to be putting my energy. One night, one of the brothers from this family, who I've become closer friends with, comes over to my place with a much larger caliber gun. And this is tying into some of the reasons why I do what I do, but it was a really painful lesson. We were playing with the gun, just like occasionally pointing at each other, but I would do that when the gun was empty. And then we were going to go to a neighborhood to buy some weed, which is my neighborhood, across the street. And he said, "If we have any problems, I've got this." And I knew he had the ability to use it like he would use it. And I also thought, of course, we're going to have a problem. The moment that I put my jacket on with intent for us to go outside, the gun goes off in my face. And my ears kind of like go from a ringing silence to hearing him screaming, "Oh shit, oh shit." And I'm on the ground, my body is limp. And he's asking me where I was shot. And I was shot the bottom of this line. You can't see it as well from here, but I was shot in the neck, and it bounced off my first rib, and the bullet got stuck behind my spine. And I thought I was going to be quadriplegic. That night I got medevaced to DC Children's Hospital from Alexandria. And not too long after, I gained the function of my legs, which I was really grateful for. But it was a really dark time. They kept me in the hospital for 4 days, which, I was very woozy and had a collapsed lung, and I'm sort of like a drain and a machine kind of pulling all the fluids out of my body so that my lung wouldn't collapse or recollapse. And the long of it was, the thing that really was a lasting consequence was, this hand doesn't work as well. This is the one that I shot myself in the hand by accident, and it was just a flesh wound. And 2 months later, I get shot in the neck, and the only effect is my hand doesn't work as well. And to me, that was, although I had no spiritual understanding, I used to draw quite a bit and considered myself an artist. And I drew this picture of the whole event and wrote divine intervention. I didn't know what that meant.
That'll make a spiritual man out of you.
What
out of me?
Yeah.
It did. I guess it didn't set in right away, but it sounds like the seeds were planted there.
It was a slow process, but seeds, as sometimes they take a while to get to the point of actually a big fruitful plant.
Especially when you're 14. And I just wanted to
Yeah,
reflect back how, I mean, there's a lot to say about the gunshot wounds too, and I want to hear
yeah,
more about them. But also just
yeah,
earlier in the story too, how much hearing how there's the divorce and the taking the firearm. To me, it was just
yeah.
sounding like there was a real powerlessness in you then, or like taking control seemed to be like what
Mm.
I was kind of hearing too, of like in the anger, the defiance of like being able to take that back or something.
Yeah.
Is that part of this for you, that journey?
Yeah, yeah, and I think there was also a real longing to not be a victim, you know. So there were a
Yeah.
couple things happening at one time. Um, you know, like I didn't want to hurt people. I just wanted not to be hurt anymore, you know.
Yeah.
And that's a big
Safety too.
distinction. What's that?
Trying to find that safety with that other family too, or who's going to protect me, who's got my back.
Right.
There's like
Right.
that combination of that wasn't there for you, or you didn't feel that.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, you know, after that, you know, as you'd imagine, I dealt with some pretty strong trauma. Like I had PTSD, and it was pretty powerful for me. The experience after, um, I had a lot of shame around losing a part of my body, and I felt like I was only a partial person, like a partial version of myself, because losing you know, the appearance of one arm looking different and one hand looking different than the other, and um, it was hard. But not long after that, you know, it was messy, and there was a lot of things happening. I ended up violating probation and going to detention, and um, I kind of wanted to as like a rite of passage, and it was silly, but it wasn't that much fun once I got there. It was, you know, didn't want to keep going there, and then I kept getting into trouble, and I was asked, you know, what I would like to do essentially, and I said I want to go back to this place where I remember being happiest, which, you know, was this residential facility. You know, it was actually a beautiful place, out in Leesburg, in the top of kind of the top of a mountain, and and I wanted to really get serious about, you know, what I could do to change my life. I didn't immediately go there and, you know, do that, but it wasn't long before I did. Um, and I really embraced this now as this therapeutic thing actually works. Therapy actually works, and I can work with this person who I trust, the same person. His name was John Craig, still is John Craig. Um, and if I listen to him and I do what he's suggesting, I feel better. My first goal, by the way, and I asked him because we had these weekly goals, was to talk about my hand. And I kind of smiled and laughed, like, "Oh, this is challenging, but I'm open." And people talked about how my whole behavior, like how I was changed so much, just being willing to do that and doing that and talking about this part that really was a source of shame and pain for me. Um, so a lot happened in between. This is a long version of an answer to your question. But between now I'm 15 and I go back home, and I don't immediately go to the worst parts of town I can find. That part of town, by the way, I was talking about was called the Hole. It might still be called the Hole. If you get an idea of what kind of place it was, like it wasn't a great place. Um, and so now I'm seeking friends that are more positive, which feels kind of weird to me at this point because I'm not used to it. I'm used to people that get into a lot of trouble, and I'm used to those being my peer group, those people being in my peer group. Um, and I'm making more healthy decisions, you know, things like I'm starting to exercise. Actually, the first time I met John Craig, he got me into running, and there was actually a running group where we would wake up early and we would run in the morning together. And then I took that home with me, and he said, you know, if you just run 3 times a week for 15 minutes minimum, 3 to 4 times a week, just do that for 2 months. Don't ask any questions. See how you feel afterwards. And I did. And I remember feeling like this is helpful. This moves the needle a little bit. And over time, I on and off had a relationship with him afterwards, a therapeutic relationship. And, I didn't right away go to college. I spent a year working a sort of menial job right out of high school, and didn't really think about college. But then I realized I don't want my life to be this. And so I got myself into college, and I thought, what do I want to study? And I wanted to study what was so impactful in my life. I mean, around the same time of me starting, John did something amazing, which was when I started school. I talked to him, and he said, "Come see me. Come see me once a week on my lunch break." And he didn't charge me anything. He just saw me, which is, like I can't tell you how grateful I am for that, because it really made a huge difference in really seeing me through. It wasn't like a straight path by any means, but as I would talk to him and learn and listen and continue, I started to study psychology and thought, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to help people and give back what I've been given, which in this case is a life worth living. And
hearing the story too for a second is just remarkable, that how the impact this had on you, going to this facility that was out in the country and then having this man in your life. Like, something I want for everybody, but it's just a case study in like what is possible with a troubled teen. That you're someone I look up to other people. You're a leader in the community and you're helping so many people, but like had no idea you were shot twice and no idea your level of suffering you went through to get to where you are. And just to see how just having that one person take interest in you, make a time on his lunch break and be there for you that way, like how that's so transformational. It's really moving to me to hear the impact he had on you. So I just wanted to reflect that.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it was, he's like a living angel in my life. Just such a wonderful, wonderful man who also, he modeled like just deep integrity. Like, he didn't take shit, but he loved harder than anybody, and he understood ethics, which a lot of people sometimes have loose ideas around. And what he said, he did in full integrity. And these were really important lessons for me, because what I didn't know at the time was I was also learning how to do it by working with him for years and years. Now, he studied under Carl Rogers, one of the founders of the humanistic perspective of psychology. So he was directly with him, and he had a real unique way of really, really showing that he understood. And that was powerful. Like, just being understood.
Do you use the word mentor to describe him too in your life? Is he your mentor, or does that apply for you?
Certainly partially. Like, he's a lot of things. But I mean, you could certainly call him a mentor as well.
I just think about with coming of age now and having a man, like it is pretty uncommon to have that role model mentor, that man in your life who is, because I can also feel how he, or it's pretty clear how he impacted your career trajectory the rest of your life. So I mean, there's all of course, that immediate shorter term change of it seems like it's lasted, of life is worth living, that perspective I heard you say that he brought you, but then in other ways too, it sounds like it was a multifaceted kind of impact he had on you, multi-layered.
No, he was amazing. And it's interesting because I leave out a part that's pretty important about this not being a straight line. Things got better when I left the place that I was in. It was called Graydon Manor. When I left there at 15, things got better for a while. I went to an alternative school because at this point I was expelled from public school. But I ended up like going through kind of some emotional roller coasters, for lack of a better word. And at a certain point, my dad and me, we locked horns, which we had many times growing up. But we had sort of a physical, not like a crazy fight, but like a physical sort of a wrestling situation. And he said, "You got to leave my house." Um, and I spent 6 months of my senior year in high school um, in a teen shelter. And what's important about this is, me and my dad ended up reconciling, and I ended up coming back into his home, which was really good because also that I don't know where I was going to go, but some of the options that I was considering at the time would have really set me up. So it's another one of those, wow, everything worked out in a way that supported me, even though it seemed so incredibly crazy. But a few things happened. So I started my career in counseling in a therapeutic foster care agency. And that was while I was still getting my undergraduate degree in psychology. And then when I got my first full-time role in the field, I applied to work in this teen shelter that I lived in for 6 months. And I told them on the interview, when they asked me what makes you different than other people, and I said, because I've lived here. No, they didn't know that. I've lived here, and I can show the people that we can actually change our lives, and I can show them that there's hope. And that was a really beautiful, like full like coming full circle. Yeah.
I was going to ask too, coming back to starting that career journey, coming in after this, you've lived there, you said, your background.
Yeah.
How did that, what, and I'm already hearing one way, but how did that lived experience of going through these systems and being a patient and living there and going through everything you went, how did that shape your understanding of mental health as you joined the field and what mental health meant?
Yeah. Good question. Well, there's a combination of things. I learned because, really out of necessity, how many different tools there are and how many different parts of mental health there are. Like, mental health doesn't start and stop right here. What we think is very important, but what we eat very much affects how we think and how we move our bodies or don't. Who we spend time with, and do we have close relationships, and even like paying attention to other things, like do we have toxicity in our body of some sort? And generally all of us do on some level, right? But there are so many sides of it. You can't separate the mind or the emotions from anything else that is in the human experience. So what I've learned, both as someone who's needed this and, to this day, I use a lot of tools. I just realized that, we have to be holistic if we want to be well. If we want to have mental health, we need to be physically healthy. We need to do all the things. Yeah.
So separating mental health out, there does seem to be some value of separating it out in the sense of like at a level of, I see why we've done it as a society, and I'm also with you that everything's so interconnected to spirit, to the body, to even root what we eat affects our minds very clearly. How my mood is, how my mind processes it too. And I'm thinking about how what you were saying before I asked that question too. You were saying how you're coming in and the transformation is possible too when it comes to you're in the mental health system, you've been in the system, and you've transformed, you've healed. You were coming in with a perspective of mental health of what's possible too. I don't know if you describe it as an optimism or as maybe it is a pragmatic approach to transformation, that it's real, it happened to you, and like how that is that woven into how you work and how you think of mental illness even.
Are you talking about optimism?
I'm talking about, I characterize your perspective as optimism. Maybe you want to use a different
Yeah.
word of
Yeah.
just believing the transformation is really possible and
Yeah.
having lived it.
Yeah. So I definitely, when people come to me and they feel, like their situation, they're just stuck in their situation and they don't know how they're going to get out of it. Uh, Often I'll help them see that there are likely hidden gifts in this real challenge that they are stuck in. Um, and because that's just been my experience personally and working with many people, that, loss, of whatever it might be, or things really not working out, or deep anxiety and fear, there often are gifts hiding in these, like including um, the ability to go deeper and use tools that we didn't use before and be happier in the process, or also in contrast to the experience of whatever the challenge is. So yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that helps too. And when we're talking about all the tools, it feels like
Yeah.
a good time to segue to. As you're getting into mental health in your story,
Yeah.
when is meditation and mindfulness? Because that's how I first know of you. Maybe many people out there
Yeah.
know of you as a meditation teacher. Does
Yeah.
that journey start around the same time?
So I was 14, actually, introduced to just some progressive relaxation techniques, which I loved. I was actually in Great Manor, and one of the counselors there, I think he was actually the director of the counselors. He introduced this technique, and I was amazed at how good I felt after practicing. And so every time I felt a little anxious, or often when I had the chance, I would practice this technique, and then I just became curious. Um, so that's where the seed was planted. Uh, Over time, um, I would experience different kinds of meditation and learn, but it wasn't until closer to my late 20s that I I was really having um, a bit of a crisis, like trying to figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I thought I had to totally have a straight line figured out all the way to the end, and it was insane. But I was in a role where um, I was responsible for close to 100 people with high needs, and it wasn't where I wanted to be. I had a lot of love for the people that I was working with, but I just felt like a burnout kind of a role, and I didn't want to make a move too quickly, and then just sort of invest in the wrong place. But I didn't realize that I was creating a lot of suffering, which I was, through fear and a looping mind. And so what happened was, I, by chance or not, got connected with these disciples of a person named Sri Chinmoy. And I'm not like a devout follower or any of that stuff, but they were teaching a meditation course that I became interested, and then I started working in this meditation, the style of their meditation, and I really liked it. I felt peace that I hadn't remembered feeling, um, in the longest time. And when the course wrapped, I asked this one of the instructors um, to if I could continue to work with her, and so she agreed, and I worked with her week after week. And cool story. She's this little woman. She's older. She actually still owns a gift shop in Cleveland Park in DC, and and Sri Chinmoy was very into being very physical and challenging the body, especially when it comes to what the mind thinks isn't possible, and created this self-transcendence race where it was a 3,100-mile race on concrete on a city block in Queens, Jamaica, Queens, New York. So just a couple months of running in a circle. And she was the only woman to have completed that race year after year, hitting like Guinness books or Guinness records. What was amazing about it was, she didn't brag about it. Somebody else said something about it, to like kind of say, look what's possible. And she credited it to meditation, like just being able to quiet her mind. And it became very impactful. I woke up, I was due at work at that time after a commute at 7 a.m. And I would wake up even earlier so that I could meditate every morning. It didn't make everything perfect, but it made things better. And that's when I had a renewed real interest, because of the suffering, to really go deep into meditation. And so that was one of the influencing times in my life regarding meditation. And over time, I kept learning. I did a lot with Tara Brach over the years. I have done a number of Vipassana retreats and practices, and just learning all kinds of different techniques of meditation. And, one of the most helpful ones is to just not believe everything that you think. That's the big challenge, is we have a thought in our own voice in our head, and it's been there over and over and over again. So we just assume that it's true and have all the feelings associated with it. But in meditation, to just notice thoughts are moving, and I'm what's watching the movement, not the movement itself.
That's really well said. That's been my experience in meditation, because you
Yeah.
talked about touching on peace early in your meditation
Yeah.
journey, feeling that experience of peace, and that's great.
Yeah.
Like, I love when that happens, but
Yeah.
I think being a daily meditator for some years now, I've realized the real gift is what you just described, is that ability to step outside. I heard someone describe it as like not being in the laundry machine going around,
Yeah.
or like with the laundry, but watching the laundry, being able to see the
I like-
thoughts. And it's just very simple analogy for me to see that, of like, I experience that in meditation. And yeah, that also brings me peace sometimes, to peace, that work. And it often changes how I relate to my fear or my other, intense emotions, or even not so intense experiences that are spinning through me. It seems to really change things for me.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and it's amazing when we can get to a point. I think too. I love the way you said it, being out of the washing machine and not in it, because man, we get turned upside down by just our own thoughts, just ruminating on our own thoughts. But the magic is, it's like, if we're just stuck in this one space of the mind, and this familiar space of emotions, whatever they might be, positive, negative, often negative, and then we're able to just notice it, and in your words, be out of the washing machine and notice, oh, there's a room, and where's this room? This room is in a building. Where's this building? It's in a neighborhood. Where's this neighborhood? It's in a city. Where's this, like, keep getting bigger and bigger. It's like, wow, it's not just that we can experience more space, it's that we are that space. Like, that's a really awesome experience. And it's not every day. Like, often we're just in the washing machine, like, meditating. So that's an important thing to remember, is like, a lot of people have this idea about meditation, that because you're meditating, it's supposed to be quiet here. And that's often not the case. And there's not a whole lot of control over what's happening. I think what's most helpful is just allowing what's happening and becoming aware, and not fighting it, not clinging to some particular outcome or sensation or idea. It can make a difference.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll have my regular practice is 25 minutes, and I might have 20 seconds at the end where I feel that. And the whole time I might have 0 seconds. And the whole time, this is, I think, people think this is a really good, maybe a misconception of meditation. I'm hearing from new meditators, they need to be in peace. A lot. If they're not doing it well, they're failing if they're not meditative and Zen. And I've been doing it for years, and I still but for that 20 seconds, I feel incredibly grateful. Like that, me sitting with my thoughts racing, my fear, whatever it is coming up. Also, I feel like takes the power away. Like the way you described it, I am the room, of I can do something with this now. There's a power over it, that if I can be with it and not have to run from it, there is a real facing of myself, a real, it's so easy to distract myself, or to run away from my own thoughts or my own mind. It's like, really, I think what we're trained to do in this society is to, or I've experienced, is it's so easy to not put my intentions and energy in 100 different places. And so I think that practice of just it can be a little bit of a battle. Honestly, it's like a warrior path, I think, in some ways, the path of meditation of really, it's one of the hardest things I do in the day, I would say, with meditating often.
Yeah.
And the best.
Awesome that you're doing it. Awesome that you're doing it every day. That's huge.
So now that we're talking about new meditators and people getting into it too, I heard how, your journey, you went really deep into Vipassana meditations, which people don't know. It's a 10-day meditation practice that Ari's also done, who's can talk about. But people who are starting who aren't at the Vipassana level yet, just getting into it. Like, how do you? I've had a lot of people asking me lately about this.
Yeah.
What advice do you give people?
Well, it depends on the person. I will say one of the best ingredients is pain, because if you're motivated to, or if someone is motivated to go beyond the pain that they're experiencing, they're often willing to do things that are uncomfortable. In this case, meditation is often uncomfortable, but maybe it's less uncomfortable than the pain. But some things that are really helpful, just some sort of key practices I find, to create regularity, same time, same place, and to set the bar very low at the beginning. A low bar is wonderful because you can always exceed a low goal. Like if you are to, simply start 5 minutes a day, that doesn't sound like much, but at some point it might feel pretty good. And you might say, okay, five minutes a day, I can do that. Then maybe they bump it up to 10, maybe again, 15. But to go from nothing to 20 minutes or 25 minutes can be really challenging. So another thing that can help a new meditator is to meditate in a group. Things like Zoom have become wildly available. And there can be a sense of being supported, but also not wanting to be the one to leave the room. In person can be even better, of course. It's just not always possible or feasible for different reasons. But doing it with other people, that can hold us accountable and keep us kind of in a pattern and establishing a new behavior.
Just adding the working with teachers has been the key for me too. I'll just say working with someone like Yonah, I want to add that here, that to me, having a teacher and someone to be accountable to has just been critical. So I want to say Yonah would be a great person too. And I know Ari has a question. I'm going to pass to Ari now.
Hey, it's Ari here. Yonah, thanks for sharing everything you did thus far. I've also practiced meditation for over a decade and have done the 10-day Vipassana retreat. I'm curious to know if there's an impactful meditation session that shifted your life or gave you like a really meaningful perspective in your life. One meditation that you can share with us.
Yes. That's a great question. Thanks. I was talking about that period where I got involved with the disciples of Sri Chinmoy, and this woman, her name was Shupabra, and she had like a cool given name by her teacher. And I found myself out of that job that I was in for close to 2 years, creating a lot of suffering for myself. And I learned what that really was after the fact. But I found myself going into a meditation 2 days after being out of that job. And I had some different intentions. One was to really be of greatest service, and I was fully sincere. At the time, I said to myself, I'm willing to give up everything to be of greatest service, and I meant it. And then I also thought about my mom, and she had just lost her husband, my stepdad, to cancer. And she was in a lot of pain. And I had a history, like a really painful history with my mom. And it created like walls around my heart, for lack of better words. And in this moment, I was in this meditation and I just imagined hugging my mom and just healing her heart with love. And there was nothing but love. And at the time, my breath changed. I started breathing more heavily, and it was like instinctual. And I noticed I blew out a candle in front of me, and I opened my eyes for a second and noticed, because it had gotten darker. And then I kept going with it. And then as I started breathing more and more and more, I started feeling this energy welling up from the base of my spine and going up to my head. But it was so powerful. It felt like a freight train was moving through my body. I felt it through my extremities. I felt actually energy flowing off my head. And I'd never had an experience like this before. And I felt like I was sort of dying, but not dying. It's hard to explain. I felt, and these are words that can be, that this is not a religious word that I'm using right now, but I felt like the power of God, and I felt like it was coming out from inside of me. And I was just crying and crying. I was so touched, deeply touched, and forever changed by this experience. I came out to my then wife and shared with her what had happened. I came out of the bedroom where I was, and I just wanted to understand what the hell just happened. But it certainly had such a dramatic impact on me. I would later read about Kundalini Awakening, and it sounded like that's what it was. But words and labels, I feel like, cheapen an experience and kind of try to put it into a container, when this was something else. It was almost a couple of years of holding on to a lot of bound up energy, and a lot of it related to the mind, and believing every thought and creating tons of suffering, and trying to control everything out of fear. And in this moment, none of that was present. I was just love. And that had this really powerful effect of wanting to understand what the hell was going on. I wasn't willing to work in another job, for a while. I was doing some coaching then, but other than that, I spent much of my time just taking long walks through parks in DC, or all over the city, and meditating a lot, and just trying to understand the secrets of the universe as I was. Yeah.
I love that. I always really appreciate hearing about mystical unity experiences like that. I think it's just, I love hearing about that, and I'm grateful you shared it, and just curious too. I think it's beautiful how you integrate it, because that was going to be my next question, or kind of still is, of how that rippled out in your life after that experience. And the choice to not act on it though, but to be with it in a way, to stay near it in the walks and the meditations. I think that's really beautiful, because I've also had experiences, or strong experiences, and friends using psychedelics, people who have mystical experiences in other ways, that I feel like could be a rush to take something from it, or to change your life dramatically afterwards. And there's a real gentleness. I just want to reflect that back of how you approached it. And I'd like to hear a little more about how it did turn into perspective change or actions for you in the subsequent months or years after that.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because, my friends in DC, I would talk about some of my understandings, which were wildly intuitive and spiritual, and didn't align with a lot of the people that I was spending time with. In fact, I felt very misunderstood here in the city. What I ended up doing, just sort of in a strange sort of series of events, was I ended up in Mexico for a little bit, and just a trip. But I went, and I met people that understood what I was going through, and also had things to teach me. Where in DC, people were very much just mind dominated, but there were other people that were pretty practiced in these different types of meditation, but also just intuitive, and they thought outside of the box in ways that were really nice. Now, all that said, what's interesting is I've worked with a lot of companies and organizations that probably wouldn't value much around the spiritual. That is a big part of what I share, but it's not that I, impose my ideas on people, but I just try to invite them to look at things from a greater perspective than just their mind. And so I'm careful about what I share. I mean, I've worked with the House of Representatives and the National Science Foundation and just on and on, a lot of really great groups, but also groups that I wouldn't say I had this, transcendent experience in my body, and maybe you can too. Like I don't lead with that. Um, that this is a nice forum where I get to share some of that. So thank you for that.
Well, that's what we do here. Yeah, definitely. It's about the deep sharing on the podcast. And I can relate to that in our work. We work with big corporations, Ari and I, Discovery Channel, and senior living homes, and Johns Hopkins. We got to do workshops for people that were definitely not thinking from the spiritual. They weren't leading with the spiritual and mystical. I believe that's in everybody, the spirit.
Yeah.
I mean, our approach was to invite people into nature, to plants, to connecting that way. And I mean, I think where I want to bring people is that we are nature, where we want to go. So we are nature, we are spirit. And so, but there's a meeting people where they are. Dance, I'm appreciating learning, about in your work of where do we start with nature? Where do we start with meditation and spirit work like that? Because they're certainly important to me. And there's a real dance there to be done. So what was your strategy going in to political chambers here, or rooms in DC or corporations? How do you bring it?
Well, I think it's important. Good teachers have taught me to speak a language that people understand. So, I try to gauge what it is that people can connect with, and I share what I think is most valuable to them based on that. I mean, obviously science heavy, not obviously, but science heavy presentations where I can say this study pointed to that, and in this situation, this was helpful for groups of people, and et cetera. And there was a combination of things. There has been a combination of things that I've shared over the years around holistic wellness. More often than not these days, when it comes to companies and organizations, we are doing things around mindfulness and meditation almost exclusively at this point. But yeah, I just try to keep in mind the audience. It's very important that I understand what will resonate with them and speak to that.
Yeah, more and more mindfulness and meditation are being accepted. I'm seeing that it's constantly increasing because it is an effective medicine. I mean, we're exploring health on this season here, these group of episodes, and why it was important for me to have you on. And because we haven't done an episode, we so focused on meditation recently and on the mind. And I like how in this conversation, it's not separate. I don't feel it separate from your other work, your counseling, your supporting. The way you support, it's like part of who you are, which I appreciate. It's integrated in who you are, because I do think mindfulness, yes, it is a accessible thing for everybody to do for 5 minutes on Headspace or on an app, but it is much beyond that too. Like I think we've gone there. We've heard from your really rich experience with it. We've gone beyond it. It is kind of it is a medicine. It is applicable right now, but there's so much depth to it too. So I think that I want to see people get started too. And I also, something I want to see in the world is the appreciation of the traditions it comes from too, of like learning about the history of it, which you've done, like study with great teachers. Not like, I don't want to diminish people using it as a hack to feel less stress and less, like that's the starting point. And I think, but I just wanted to reflect that I think that it's part of the medicine right now for our mental health crisis in the world. I think it cannot be neglected, I would say. So it's important to me to talk about that with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are some of the statistics, studies around the impact of mindfulness, around stress, around mental health that you could share with us today? I don't actually know the latest information around that.
Yeah. I think even more relatable is just the experience, like the experiential benefit, or some of the benefits that can come. And, when we talk about stress, often what is what's influencing stress the most. And we sort of touched on it already. And that's not just that thoughts are happening, but that we're believing each and every thought. And physiologically, we are kind of looping back and forth with what kind of a state this creates in the body. Maybe our breath changes and our posture changes, and then that influences our mind, and we go back and forth. What mindfulness can do is make us aware of things that we weren't aware of, like that maybe we're not breathing that deeply, and the breath has a tremendous impact on how we feel. Or that we don't feel our body at all, that we're fully immersed in this realm of the mind, and we're missing out on the richness of what does it feel like to be in this body in this moment. And at first, it sounds boring to the mind. But deepening attention into, okay, how does it actually feel to stand here or to sit here, to take this breath, to chew this food, maybe without a screen in front of you. Good luck. But it is possible, believe it or not. And, approaching the everyday with more curiosity and interest, the everyday moments that would otherwise just not be that interesting, and instead with some level of curiosity and awe, it can change things quite a bit. So yeah, just some thoughts that I have on that.
For people who want to connect with you or learn more about your work, how do you recommend them connecting or reaching out?
A couple ways. You can go to my website, yonahlevy.com. You can also go to Instagram at Yonah Levy. At either one of those places, but particularly the website, there's a contact tab. You can reach out to me. You can email me directly at thrive@yonahlevy.com. And we can just have a conversation. Like, it always starts with a conversation. And if there's something that I offer that you're interested in, I'd love to talk more. I work as a coach, one-on-one with people, and we go in a lot of different areas regarding bringing people back to peace, and then from there thriving. And I also work with different businesses bringing mindfulness and meditation. So any of those, mostly what I do. I have some online courses as well. I have one on Insight Timer right now, more to come. So yeah.
I was enjoying checking out all your links through Instagram recently to prepare for this, and started your course on fear and reading some of your blogs on that too. And maybe we could just close out with that, a little brief discussion too on, because I noticed one of your recent blogs is about fear. It's something on my mind too, is what fear means and how to work with it. So maybe that's like a closing thought. I'd love to hear a little bit about that from you.
Yeah. So very important. I think fear is, just the hardest thing to deal with. And actually it is positive. I've heard Tara Brach talk about it as nature's protector. That it actually is wired into us to keep us safe. But when it's on overdrive, that's when it's important to sort of intentionally take the wheel and realize, okay, there's more fear than is helpful. And it's not always 100%. But the more that we simply acknowledge, okay, this is what's happening, this is what physically feels like, these are the thoughts, and there are a lot of tools to do that, then we can start to have some space between what is being experienced and being the actual experiencer of what is in the experience. So there's that little bit of space. Even the smallest amount can be incredibly helpful. And there are tons of techniques, from naming to moving the body. Like, sometimes that's the best thing, is to just don't stay still and try to figure it out. Go take a walk or a run or go to the gym or do something that like gets this stuff out of your body. It's so important. And, social support is incredibly important. Not knowing you're not alone with your deepest fears. Often if you share them with someone you trust, you'll find that it's it becomes very normalizing, someone who is safe, and they might say, I've had that experience too. And um, it's important to know also the mind is often a liar. It creates movies that don't turn out to be true, but they're totally felt in the moment. And so realizing, okay, I'm creating this experience, and there are a lot of ways to recreate the experience to have a better experience.
Thanks for sharing those insights. Definitely a topic on my mind and alive for me. I know others too.
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that work on it. And also want to thank you for this conversation. I feel closer to you. Just learned a lot about, really appreciate your vulnerability in this conversation too. And bringing me up to date on your work as well. So just grateful to spend this time with you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to share some things that I don't usually share publicly. And hopefully people can hear some of this and realize, what maybe seems really tough in their lives. It's possible to go beyond that and to have a better quality of life, maybe than ever before.
Thanks for sharing that message.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to my conversation with Yonah Levy. As always in this season, we're going to have a health tip now from my co-host and producer, Ari Rubens. Ari, what do you got for us today?
I got a fantastic health tip for people looking to deepen their meditation posture. Originally, yoga asanas or yoga poses were just 4 poses. Easy pose with your crossed legs, and another one is Lotus Pose, where you see where your feet are all the way wrapped up to your hips. So the way to develop more flexibility for that pose is through butterfly position. Butterfly is where your feet are together and your knees are apart. The yogis back in the day realized that most people, when they had these 4 postures to meditate in, couldn't sit. So they started to develop more training programs. But one of the best ones you can do is that butterfly position. So feet together, knees apart. You can do this on the ground. Place your hands behind you to support your back, and lift your knees up and down, up and down, up and down, about 100 times, nice and slow. Do this before your seated meditation. That will really help build more flexibility. Now, if that's still uncomfortable to sit in an easy pose, which means your legs are crossed or any other seated position, know that the spiritual teacher Buddha has taught people to meditate in 4 ways: standing, lying down, sitting, like I'm explaining, an easy pose, or walking. So you have 4 options as well to start and cultivate a great meditation, a consistent meditation practice. So that's my health tip. Find ways around making your meditation practice more at ease and more stable and comfortable.
Thanks for sharing that, Ari. I can definitely relate to that feeling like sitting cross-legged for a long time was a boundary on my meditation practice. And it's great to remember that yoga's original intention really was to prepare us to sit for a long time in meditation, and to not let that stop you too. I hear you saying that too. We don't need to let it stop us from meditating. If we can't sit comfortably, it's something to work towards. In our Western bodies, we sit in chairs so much that we're not comfortable getting into that lotus position. I'm not comfortable yet. So I think that's really important to anyone who's listening to this who feels like sitting is a barrier to them meditating, that mindfulness is accessible to anybody, any body. As long as you have a mind, you can be mindful, I would say. So thank you again for sharing that tip. And thanks again to everybody listening out there. Definitely like and subscribe this. Let us know if you have any to this episode. Let us know if you have any questions. If you have any questions for Ari on meditating, you can send us an email, fourgardenspodcast@gmail.com, or write a comment. I'm happy to answer those questions too, and connect you to teachers that have been on the podcast or other resources. But once again, thanks for listening, and keep on growing.